Good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Hernandez. I'm a partner here at Bilzin Sumberg. Quick plug for our firm. We're a 125 lawyer law firm, transactional litigation, full service. This is our only office. We are very dedicated to South Florida because we practice here, and so we are also concerned about the big issues that face our community, like affordability. So today we have a great lineup of panelists, of which I'm one, and we're going to discuss this concept and some solutions in depth. It's a very difficult problem, as we all know, but we need to discuss solutions. So we welcome you. We hope you enjoy the program.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you for hosting us. We really appreciate it. My name is Ana Castilla. I have the pleasure of serving as the chair of the board for Miami Homes for All. I'm also the community development manager for TD Bank. I want to welcome all of you here today. I am so sorry if my glasses are askew. I lost one arm in the parking lot. So if anybody sees a screw that's about this big, it's mine. So sometimes I wake up that way anyways, right, with the glass. So it's wonderful to have all of you here. We started last year hosting meetings, bringing together experts, practitioners in the housing space to discuss specific situations, conditions, environments that we're facing when it comes to affordable housing. And the condo conundrum is one that we're definitely keeping an eye on. I want to be sure to thank our key holders. They are our donors that are helping us at Miami Homes for All keep our work going. We're focusing on not just policy and practice when it comes to preserving and creating affordable housing, but helping low-income individuals, families, and youth navigate the affordable housing system. So we work to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of partners collaborating and working together to make housing available for individuals that in need. And I also want to thank the sponsors for this morning's program. Without you, we couldn't do this type of meeting. And I'm very much looking forward to the conversation today. So Annie, I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joe, and all the partners here at Bilzin. Thank you, Anna. TD Bank is doing triple duty here today as a sponsor, as a board chair, as a panelist. So hats off. I'm Annie Lord. I'm the executive director at Miami Homes for All, and I'm so grateful to all of you for joining us here this morning. It is going to get real wonky in here. This was an invitation-only event in order to have the most expert voices that we could assemble at an early stage in a conversation in a problem that we find fairly intractable, or really the solutions are going to be hard to discern and hard to implement. But first, I just want to tell you a tiny bit about Miami Homes for All if you're not familiar with us. We were founded in 1985. And our goal is really to make Miami affordable for everybody. And that's a really big goal. Why would we want to do that? It's basically for two reasons. One is our economic future depends on Miami being affordable. We can't be globally competitive, and that is the arena that we're playing in, if we lose the cultural vibrancy that makes us unique and gives us a competitive advantage. We're unlike any other place on the planet. And people want to come here. That's when I talk to people, and I always ask, the first time I meet somebody who's maybe recent to Miami, I'm like, what do you like about Miami? Why are you here? And they're like, it is an authentic cultural melting pot. So that's part of our competitive advantage. Also, we have a service and lifestyle economy that is unlike any other in the world, thanks to our situation, which is unlike anybody. And in fact, maybe we can open up now that the sun's not blazing in our eyes, so we can appreciate this inspiration while we think about these important problems facing our future. To have the kind of economy that we want, we have to have the labor force that services that economy. And we're losing that labor force because they can't afford to live here. So our economic viability is at stake. And then there's the quality of life question. That affects everybody. But I really want to emphasize that we've got hundreds of thousands of households that are living in intolerable conditions. They're doubled up, tripled up in very small living quarters. They are living in their cars. They are living hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck. And the risk and the strain and the stress is unacceptable. None of us wants that. But even if that doesn't touch our lives at all, what does touch us is the quality of life for everybody. If we have so many people who are leaving our community because they can't afford, they can't make it work, then that's going to affect everybody. Where are our kids going to go to school? What's the quality of the teachers? Who's going to take care of our elders? Who's going to work in the businesses that we create? So everybody is tied together in this issue. And that's why it's important that this be a place where anybody can live. Today, right, as all of you are well aware, and as Joe, I think, highlighted briefly, we have a problem with some very important tensions, right? Some legitimate tensions. We have a situation where we have deferred maintenance on thousands of properties, right? Most of the housing stock in this county is older, right? But as Joe was telling us a couple of weeks ago, we've got nearly 1 million units and 2/3 of the state's condo units that are 30 years and older. And half of those exist in Miami-Dade and Broward County. So 425,000 aged condo units, right, are in our area. Many of the people living in those are on fixed incomes by now, or essentially they represent our working and middle class. So we have a real important tension here between wealth building and maintaining assets among our middle class, right, as I think we can all value being an important part of an economic resiliency. But we also have an affordability problem. How do we help people remain if it makes sense for them to remain? But when they're facing a very large and sudden fee to keep their building up to code, then sometimes that's impossible. That's really unaffordable for them. So what I hope that we can address today together is to begin to identify what are the top 2-3 solutions that can help us navigate these legitimate tensions. And while maintaining assets in our middle and working class, also preserve as much affordability as we can. Because if we lose all of these units, which arguably many of them are what you might call affordable or workforce housing, then we're going to have an even bigger deficit. I want to say thank you to our panel, which we're going to start with in just a second. We have their sort of mini bios in your programs. Please read them. This is like one of the most impressive panels that we've ever hosted. I'm super thrilled. Christina Pappas, I'm so sorry. Casey Crist from TD, Joe Hernandez, and Jose Regalado. I'm going to give them each a chance when we sit down to kind of share their point of view on the problem, and then we're going to dive into solutions. So grab a cup of coffee, buckle in, then we're going to move to you guys. And we want you all to participate actively in the second half of this morning. And we're going to hold you to account. It's going to be snappy. It's going to be fast. But I really hope that we can make progress. By the end of this morning, we want to have kind of a group sense of 2 or 3 things that are worth pursuing. So thank you so much. And with that, can we please have like a preliminary round of applause for our panel and for Bilzin for hosting it? And you can turn on your mics in this way. Okay, yeah, there you go. Oh, wow, they're so powerful. Okay, can you hear us in the back?
Yes.
Okay. So, I just want to go down the line and ask, in 2 minutes, what is, from in your role, how would you define the problem that we're facing right now with aging condos in Miami-Dade, let's say, or in South Florida? And what are your biggest concerns going forward? And let's just start with you, Christina.
Oh, goody. I was going to piggyback off of somebody else. All right. Thank you for having me today. It's an honor to be here. I'm with the Kai's company. We're almost a 100-year-old firm here in South Florida. It started in 1926 over in downtown, actually. So we do residential and commercial sales and leasing. And Joe was right about the numbers. Miami-Dade County, we sell more condo units than we do single family. It's just really where our housing stock is. So how would I define the problem? It's a problem that, if I place blame, I'm gonna blame the legislature for causing the problem and now causing the problem again. They allowed us to waive reserves for many years. For those of you that don't know, Florida was one of the only states that's allowed to waive reserves for as many years as we did, which was a really nice thing for many condo owners for many, many years, as they didn't need to worry about any issues or any reserves. And now it's coming to fruition. I think it's unfortunately a painful short-term problem that hopefully will result in a long-term gain for condos. Due to the fact that we waive reserves, your financial people up here will tell you we are unable to obtain certain level of loans. We can't have a 3% down payment loan that we do in single families. And so while condos are some of our most affordable housing stock, we're unable to afford them with the down payment structures that Fannie and Freddie have for single families due to the fact that we waive reserves and other requirements that Fannie would require our buildings to have. With the new legislation and the changes, that should change. So the good news is some of our most affordable housing stock will now be available to some of our first-time home buyers with some of the financing tools that we see out there and creative tools that we see in single family. So I always try to find, the light at the end of the tunnel here. And I do think eventually we'll get to a place where we have stable condos, safe condos. I think that's the most important part of where the legislature was trying to go with their changes, is to create safe environment for all of our homeowners here in Florida. But it is going to create, right now we have over 1.5 years inventory of condos on the market. You'll see more and more. You'll hear the words glut, you'll hear the words crisis. When it comes to crisis in real estate, I always think of 2008. So their foreclosures are still normal. We're still small. To me, it's not necessarily a crisis. It's a change and it's an opportunity for us to work through. And there's definitely need for more change and more availability of monies for homeowners. But when I look at foreclosure rates, they're very minimal right now. They're very low. It's not causing problems. Condo units are selling anywhere from 95 to 96% of list price. So while we might see these reductions, they're still selling within 5%, which is still a normal market in the real estate world. So I always try to focus on some of the positive sides of what's occurring before we kind of focus on, these major problems that are kind of causing some disruption in the marketplace.
Thank you, Casey.
Good morning, everyone. Casey, Crist. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Regional Vice President for TD Bank. I cover the commercial department for Miami-Dade County, but we work very closely with our retail side as well, which is the personal side of banking. So the main crisis that I see right now is really just the number of people in these units, right? The high rises are housing so many people in such a small square footage, right? So where are they all going to go? If all of these buildings are having this issue, where are they going to go? We don't have the space for that, right? So that's where you need your banking partner to come into play, provide the financing for some of these. Where I see some of the issue is it's harder to get condo units to be financed if banks know that special assessments are coming down the line, if reserves are going to have huge increases, because what impact is that going to have on the person's cash flow? Similarly, condo associations can also get financing themselves to help ease that pain of the actual unit owners. But again, they're looking at what is the unit owner's ability to pay and how much of an increase in assessments is going to happen over a short period, over a long period, is it doubling that impact? So the ability to get the financing there is also going to be constrained when you have too much going on at once. I do think it's a shorter term problem that's going to have a longer term benefit, right? But in this meantime, how are we going to solve this? And if people are moving out, those buildings are not getting repaired, not getting replenished. And it's at all levels, right? It's not, we have Brickell here, which is on the higher end of the high rise, a certain income level that can maybe weather through some of that. But then you have, apartment buildings in other parts of Miami-Dade County that may be Section 8 housing or, people that, are just getting by with making the payments that they're making now. So I think it's where do we house everybody if they can't afford it, while being able to continue to restore the buildings that we have here and keep them intact.
Awesome, thank you. Joe?
Yeah, thank you. And fabulous job kind of setting the table here and describing the problem. And in the spirit of pointing out the positives, Christina, I think we need to acknowledge that, look, we in this community, we have an incredible influx of capital, energy that's sparking new industry. And that's all good stuff, right? Ken Griffins and the Bezos and everybody that are coming out here and spending enormous amounts of money and creating, and not just coming here to buy vacation homes, they're coming here and bringing their organizations with them, and all that's great. But it creates this other problem that we're managing that has been described so well. From a real estate transactional attorney's perspective that does a lot of condo work, and particularly bulk transactions and terminations in condos, what I see as all these things, yes, the legislature pretty much failed at probably creating a regulation and a requirement for reserves that should have been there from the beginning, point blank. And now we're having to basically address the problem in a very short period of time. And there's very few ways around it without risking another Champlain Towers. And none of the legislators that we talk to want to have their name connected with that, right? So it's a very, very difficult problem. So as far as the real challenges, yes, the challenges are the displacement of a lot of people that currently live in aging buildings, and you did a fabulous job pointing out the numbers. I mean, we have a lot of projects that we have to face the facts that a lot of these projects are financially and structurally obsolete. In other words, the cost to maintain these older buildings, and I'm talking about 50, 60, 70-year-old buildings, is only going to increase every single year from now until the end of time. Yet the value of those units is at best staying stable. In a good situation, most of the time the values of those units are creeping down. So you have two diverging trend lines that we all know that I'm not a math genius, but that doesn't work, right? That doesn't work. And what also from a banking perspective, those projects become unfinanceable and therefore the units become unsellable, right? And so that is coming. We've only started to see the tip of the iceberg in my belief. And I see this up close, so I can tell you that I'm dealing with projects that are in that situation. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see many more of them. The exact number, nobody really knows. Some older projects have done a pretty decent job of reserving. Some have addressed problems, but many others haven't. And so we have to face the fact that this is going to be coming. And so the challenges are not only the displacement, but how do we handle this process of converting these older projects to newer uses in a way that benefits the community. Right now, I would be the first to admit to you, most of the projects that you see since the condo boom started on the coast, most of these projects are located on sites that dictate a certain use, right? Because of their price. If you're paying very, very high price for land on the ocean, your only real options as a developer to develop that on a profitable basis are to create a luxury product. And, I'll be the first to tell you, look, I worked on many luxury projects here at Bilzin Sumberg. Do we need many more of them? We maybe not, right? Maybe not. Now, does that mean more of them aren't going to be built? Probably not, right? Because again, the harsh truth of the economics is there, and it's very hard to get around, right? Now, that has a benefit to those unit owners, because most of those unit owners that live in very aging buildings, I always counsel them to readjust their thinking. You don't own a unit anymore. Your unit is irrelevant to the person who's gonna buy this, right? Your unit is basically just an obstacle. What you are is a landowner, and you own your undivided share of that piece of land under your building, which is extremely valuable, and that's your value. That's what you have now, right? And the good thing is, that's extremely valuable and it's going to get you, probably more than the value, the market value of your unit. It's going to get you some money. Now, is that money enough to buy a unit in the building that's gonna be there? No, right? Not even close, right? So that's where the displacement comes in, right? So we have to be prepared as a community to figure out solutions to house those people and provide affordable, attractive solutions that allow those people to continue to live here. Otherwise, they have to leave, period. And so it's a real challenge. None of this is easy, but I think if we are going to address the problem, we have to understand it thoroughly. You know, I'm a big fan of the Sun Tzu Art of War book, and know thy enemy, know thyself, right? You can't tackle a problem unless you know those two things. So anyone else stop there? Let Jose take it.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Regalado, Assistant Director of the City Miami Building Firm. My perspective comes from a compliance point of view, and everybody deserves a safe home. And the vast majority of people who are buying condos, at least who have bought condos, who are in these homes that are these, in the 40-year, 50-year, are middle class, are lower class. And this was the entry point for them to come in. And I have, unfortunately been on both sides of that spectrum from compliance, where we've had to offline building. And the pain to bring those people back home was immense. There was a lot of resources from everybody, from all arms of the government. There are, in the city of Miami, between 1,500 to 2,500 properties every year that come into recertification. And that fluctuates related to wherever, the building boom for those decades have come in. This is the basic life safety requirements of a property. But through deferred maintenance, and it doesn't really have to get to that giant cost, but through deferred maintenance, it is a giant amount of sticker shock. With that, also from what we can do on the government side is increase transparency. We're at an all-time low for, I would say, seeing what's happening, the federal government and the local government of public trust. And there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of mistrust at, in these condo boards. And where it's a big problem when you look at it at that micro level, but anybody here that's been there will know that that's kind of the only thing you see. If you've ever had something happen to you, that's all you remember. So I think that there's a lot to work on. I think that there's a lot that we can do, and I'm happy to be here to help. So thank you for at least giving us.
Thank you so much, all of you. And I know everyone in this room can already tell the level of expertise that we've got on this panel. I do want to pause and thank you to all those who've joined us. And in particular, I want to say thank you to our elected and public officials that have come today. We have representatives from the Office of County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava. Please wave if you're here. I'm going to please hold a pause just for one moment because I'm going to go through a significant list. From State Senator Alexis Calatayud, from County Commissioner Eileen Higgins, County Commissioner Marlene Bastien, from the County Department of Housing and Community Development. I know I saw Clarence. From the Omni CRA, thank you, Vaughn. From the Office of Housing Advocacy, or our Housing Advocate, excuse me. Thank you so much, Dolores. And I think from the Miami-Dade Economic Advocacy Trust. Did I see somebody? Fantastic. So thank you all so much. That's a big round of applause. Our public officials really need to. So thank you so much. So we've talked about some of we've done a great job of framing the problem, right? And identifying where our attentions are. I'm hearing also there's some short-term exigencies, right? There's the affordability immediately, right? You've got the sticker shock of the new assessments to help kind of make up for like decades of lost ground. And then you also have all important, and I was really remiss initially, I didn't mention the safety issue. We can't have people living in buildings that are falling down, full stop. So we have to manage that, right? And then we've got the long-term issues of our supply. And then the affordability is also a long-term issue, and preservation of our middle class's assets. So I want to start, anybody feel free to jump in, but I want to start with Christina and Joe. Can you talk about what solutions, policies, practices can be implemented to help smooth that sudden large assessment fee that is straining so many of our condo owners today?
Yeah, well, I can tell you that it's a very difficult problem because, we keep looking to the legislature as you guys figure it out, right? And Pasadomo has said, after calls by the governor to, you guys go into a special session and figure this out and come out with a, magic wand and solve this. And I understand why, Governor DeSantis said that because he's got to respond, but I think Pasadomo realizes it's a very complicated problem. It's not going to be solved in one session. Many constituencies have to get together and put their input in on this. And so I think the legislature is certainly going to try from the ones that we talked to. They're aware of the problem, which is good. Although the first draft of Condo 4.0 didn't really address anything in there. I reminded my colleagues yesterday on a Miami-Dade County Bar condo committee meeting that, remember guys, this is the first draft, right? This is the opening.
It's only the House bill, right?
Yeah, it's an opening bid. It's just meant to kind of start the process, so it's gonna change probably. But look, the reality is that, the safety concern is real. There are other buildings out there that are unfortunately in the shape that maybe Champlain Towers was in or close to it. And those have to be addressed, and it takes money, right? And so, the one thing that I've seen as somebody that kind of goes into these communities and either representing, sellers and groups of unit owners or developers buying them is that each one of these projects is different. Some, many of them don't have all primary residents. Some of them really have owners that are, own it for rental purposes or, so the good thing is I think that there maybe the problem of replacement is not as bad as we really thought. It's still significant. But the problem of that I articulated before about kind of the trend lines, how costs growing up. I think the issue is where do you draw the line, right? Where does it make sense for there to be a solution to the financial issue? And where is that line where that project should face the facts that it's no longer financially workable, right? And so those are the ones that I'm seeing a lot of, right? And in some cases, I'm seeing the ones that are maybe in the gray area, maybe if they do spend the money, but they still have the problem. And there are, I can tell you without naming them, buildings very close to where we're sitting right now.
Yes.
That when you look at the building, you were like, how could they have that problem? It looks like a fairly new building, yet they have, high six-figure special assessments coming their way because of, lack of reserves and things like that. And so, as far as solutions, look, I've actually counseled some private equity lenders that want to come in and are very excited about lending. But the problem with that is private equity is seeking yield, right? They're seeking return. And this is not really a situation where you want to go in and basically give associations in trouble high-priced debt. So I told them, look, if that's your strategy, go find companies to buy or a real estate place. This is probably not an area that you can, exploit. And are there state funding solutions? I've heard of, and I know in Dade County, there's a program that lends up to, I think it's $150,000 and that's great. like many other affordability solutions, is it enough to make a dent in the problem? I don't know, right? I don't know enough about it, but it's better, it's great that we have it. Maybe that can be funded more, and maybe, we identify, projects that are really in need and somehow get that funding to them. So I unfortunately, I don't think there's an easy solution to it. I think some of the, projects that are really in trouble and really on the older, maybe on the real bad end of the spectrum, maybe should have identified first, but the problem is that there's a lot in the center, like the ones I'm talking about close to here, that have the same issue and the same problem and no real solution to figure it out, other than let's find a developer to buy us, right? And that seems to be the easy solution.
Right.
But it's a whole nother subject about the termination statute and the complication, which we can get to,
Right.
but I'll leave that.
Thank you, Joe. Christina, what about you?
I think that one thing to point out though for HOAs, and everyone kind of hears the reserve and they think, all right, the roof needs to be replaced in 15 years and it's gonna cost us $1 million, we need $1 million today. That's not true. The reserve study and what the legislation is requiring is that by the time the roof does need to be replaced, you need to have those funds. So hopefully, but what we're seeing is some associations are not saying, okay, in year one, we're gonna take that $1 million divided over the 15. So in year one, we need X. And what they're doing is saying, we're gonna assess you for $1 million today for the roof, and then hey, the windows, and so that's what they should be doing in what feels like kind of an easier solution for a little bit is like, hey, why don't we take our total amount needed per year, divide that out, and then assess per year. But the reaction from these condo boards and the concern they have with getting approvals from the city and the state is that they need to do it all at once. And so that's what's causing a little bit of your 6-figure problems. Now, some of them need them sooner than later, so they don't have the luxury of the 15, 20-year time frame, and so they do need them in 2 or 3 years. And there are massive issues within 2 or 3 years, which is causing that. But they just a friendly reminder to our condo boards that they are allowed to space out the life expectancy of that item, each item from the CERS report, and that they can then assess appropriately per year to do that. And so that's a small thing that we're seeing some of our condo boards kind of just go in this huge extreme situation and going, all right, we need all the money today and we have to fully fund today, which is impossible for most people. And then, but then I think the other issue you're seeing is one, you have this issue of, okay, we have to fund these issues. So we have to assess, especially for those. And then we have to change our condo fees because we haven't been paying into the reserves ever. So now your fees are going to include a reserve requirement. And so that's what's hitting our homeowners is I have this assessment and my HOA fees are actually going to a normal level now. And I say normal because if you look around, if you looked around the rest of the country, people love buying here because they're like, oh, the HOVs are a quarter per square foot. Like it's unheard of. Even 50 cents a square foot is unheard of for our fees compared to the rest of the country. When you look at condos in New York and Chicago and all these other, what they're doing to maintain their buildings, it is going to have to adjust. I kind of say this about insurance too, right? We'll get into an insurance conversation, but we are going to have to adjust a little bit to what is a normal condo fee for these buildings to continue to maintain the building. And it's no longer $100 for my 1,200, 1,500 square foot, apartment. You might actually have to pay $500, $600, $700, maybe even $1,000 a month to continue to maintain it. And that might be what the new normal is, right?
Let me quickly add, because this is excellent points. I happen to live in a condo and I'm on my condo board, which possibly makes me the dumbest person in the room.
Yeah.
But there's a long story tied to that. But the other thing that condo owners are facing in order to ensure their structure, when you live in a condo, basically the condo association ensures the structure, right? And the common elements, which means basically the building. And the unit owners, we basically insure the inside of our unit, right? The HO6 insurance. Anybody who lives in a condo is familiar with this. But we're and my condo's not that old. Fortunately, we're in decent shape. We've got our issues, but not bad. But and I'll give you this example because it's a very common one. Our building's about 20 years old. Our roof had an estimated useful, we're 22 years old. Our roof had an estimated useful life of 20 years. Our roof is fine. It hasn't leaked a drop. But our insurance company said, we won't insure you unless you replace the roof,
Yes.
right? And that's happening to a lot of these older buildings. They can't get the statutorily required insurance on the common elements unless they address certain things now, right? And that's a big problem. Like, we had to redo our roof. Fortunately, we have the funds to do it, but a roofing job is not cheap for a building like this across the street or the one behind it, right? And so that's kind of what we're facing the pressure from, not only the issue and the statute, but the insurance industry out there is also, because they have a real vested interest. They're taking the risk, right? So it's a very complex problem, and a lot of buildings face the same issue. Balconies and things that weren't necessarily a problem, or roofs that didn't leak but are 10, 15, 20 years past their estimated useful life. Those things have to be fixed now. You can't reserve for them. They're not going to let you wait 10 years. You have to put that, and that's primarily why we're seeing these six-figure special assessments now. So I just wanted to.
Well, and I want to jump off of that too and ask Casey, you know, tell us, what is the banking industry or your bank or anyone, right? And Joe alluded to local financing options that the county created, which I thought was innovative, very innovative, and has been drawn down quite a bit, as I understand it. A few months ago, I understood that there were 17 million drawn down on those assessment fee loans in the county. So what kinds of financing options are there to help condo associations, particularly the ones? Feel free to address the sort of the additional adjacent things, which are like, does the building where the assessment, where the repairs outweigh the asset value? Like, are you underwriting to that? Like, is anyone underwriting to that? And also, I mean, I think there were a few things brought up, but yeah, what are the financing options to help cover these expenses?
No, that's a great question, and things that, you know, we're seeing a lot of these days. I'm getting requests maybe every week from a condo association coming. Some are reasonable requests, some are, you know, assessments per unit owner that they weren't looking to finance at all. And I had somebody come to me and say, hey, the association's not gonna come for a loan, we're gonna put this all on the unit owner and it's gonna be $300,000 per unit. I'm like, what's the value of the unit itself, right? It wasn't far above that, so think about that, right? And banks, obviously, they wanted us to try to approve the whole building to be able to give everybody in that building a loan, you know, kind of be a pre-approval for a HELOC or something of that nature. Obviously, banks can't take the full exposure of a whole building for each person in that building, right? That's a risk as well for the bank. But on the association side, we do offer financing on that side, which could be a very viable solution and something that we do often to help spread out that special assessment over maybe, say, 7 years, right? So instead of them having to come with the funds and be funded all within 1 year and have that huge cash flow strain on them, they could get a loan from the bank fund it, and pay that back, let's say, over 7 years now. And that's going to match the term of this special assessment. So now, instead of saying you need to have this all funded within a year, well, the association can have that reserve funded within the year through a loan, but the unit owners now have, let's say, and I'm just saying 7 years because that's a typical term, they might give 7 years to pay that special assessment. And that term is gonna be very much tied to the useful life of the asset that they're trying to reserve for, because what you don't want is another special assessment happening during that same term, because now you're doubling up on it, right? So you always wanna match that term of any special assessment to the useful life or remaining useful life of any assets that are being reserved for, and the bank can then finance that. Typically, what we do in a period like that, or in a situation like that, is allow the association, let's say, a year, 18 months to draw up, kind of like a line of credit, right? Use the funds as you need it for that year, so you're not paying interest on funds right away when you don't need it. Reduce that interest cost as much as possible, and then once that 18 months hits, you know, we term out the rest of it, right? And you have that remaining time to pay it off. In the meantime, the association is collecting assessments, you know, every month, and is building up a little bit of a reserve to pay back that loan as well. With that, the associations need to take into consideration, there's gonna be interest expense too, right? So now, it's not just the reserve, but they also have to build into that assessment any interest expense that might come with that as well. We do see this often, it works out well. You know, when we do see special assessments, we've seen that, a lot of these types of loans, even well before the legislation was passed, because of the no reserve requirement, right? People didn't have general reserves, so anytime there was any maintenance to the building and associations decided I'm going to keep my reserves low and only special assess every time we have a project, we would help them finance that. But now those are the buildings that are coming into the issues of not having the reserves, the reserves, in place and coming into that larger.
I want to jump into this really quickly, and then I want to make sure I give Jose a chance to chat about from what he's seeing. But you're saying that these are like this is already a market. You guys have that the banking industry has been participating in for some time. What are the tiers of that, and where does it not work, right? And I'm thinking particularly about affordability, right? And so, is it are you seeing a lot of loans that go to buildings where, say, the owners are, maybe on fixed income or really are in a, low moderate income bracket? Or is that really not, you're not seeing as much of that because it's not as viable? And so what do other parties need to do, such as, as the county has done, to step in and really support that household?
Yeah, when it comes to what qualifies those types, banks look primarily at cash flow, right?
Sure.
On any asset.
Yeah.
That's normal.
Many people think that, we wanna go and foreclose, that is the last thing we ever wanna do. We do not want your property, we want the cash, we wanna get paid, we don't want, any property, right? So in these situations, cash flow is pretty easy, right? You might not see it in their existing financials that they have, their historical financial information, which is typically what you look at. But for condo associations, we have a flow of cash flow coming from the special assessments that are going to be paid by those unit owners. And we look at that as our stream of cash flow. What comes into play is if those unit owners don't pay, right? That is where you don't have the cash flow. Well, so what we look at is what is the current delinquency rate?
Yeah.
How much of a shock is it going to be to the unit owner to have this additional payment now? So the longer you're able to stretch that, the better, because it's the less of a shock, right? And you come into play of, yeah, we wanna get this funded super quickly, but how does that affect your delinquency rate if you try that too quickly, right? To increase that too quickly. We look at the management. The management company is critical here and how they're managing and what policies they have in place. There's certain statutory requirements, but every board can, set their own restrictions, either stricter as well as to what is your policy as soon as something goes delinquent, because what can generate cash flow is the association's ability to foreclose on that unit, sell that unit, and then generate the cash flow. So a huge piece that we look at in terms of just the special assessment paying it back is what is the value of those units of the total building as well compared to our loan amount, so that we can see, okay, if they started to not get that cash flow and people started to become delinquent on their loan payments, how are they able to generate cash flow from selling these units in order to pay us back as well? Because the association has those policies in place to be able to put them in default, take over the unit, sell the unit, generate the cash flow they were supposed to receive from that special assessment. So the management, I would say, is one of the key pieces in that financing, as well as looking at it, how many are primary residences versus investments versus second home. If they're primary residents, people are a lot more prone to make their payments because they want to keep their place to live.
We always say you've never washed a rental car. Right? So I always tell homeowners, when you're gonna rent out your place, just remember, I've never seen anyone wash their rental car before they turn it back in, so it's
yeah. So that we look at that mix, and you'll see it when you if they've applied for financing, there will be a questionnaire and it'll ask all these questions. What's your delinquency rates? What is your breakdown of primary homes, secondary homes, investment properties? Because those all come into the motivation to make the payments. And I like that you use the rental car because I think of this whole problem as well as kind of like a car situation, right?
Yeah.
If you do your regular oil change, your regular maintenance on your car, it's going to last a lot longer before you need to buy that new engine. But if you just let it go, which a lot of these buildings have, now they're having to get a new engine or get a new car, right? And
so I'm not hearing that necessarily the income of the owners in a building is as important, perhaps, as because theoretically, right, the asset more or less matches that income. And so it's really about management, motivation, right? And like, so all these other things. So I kind of want to take this opportunity to ask Jose, because, I see you nodding, and I'm sure that when you're interacting, right, with the buildings that are running into these recertification moments, maybe you're actually asking some similar questions, right? And you're, sorry, life continues, my computer telling me. So Jose, can you talk a little bit about what are the solutions that you're thinking about from your perspective and from the city's perspective to this? And I realize that you may be looking at more of like a long range as opposed to sort of like this initial shock question. Or maybe you're not, I don't know. How are you thinking about the solutions to this from education to the condo boards, like how to manage through this, right, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, it's both. You have, so to that end, as we're mentioning, the terms of the loans that are usually 7 years, the recertification the first recertification due to deferred maintenance, because you don't have to pay it. Typically, in a lot of these lower income or median income buildings don't really come into the permit process until one day an inspector shows up and slaps an unsafe structure notice on the building. They slap the unsafe structure notice on the condo president, because we pull title. So we go through each one of these properties, and that's when everybody, in the building completely like wakes up to that shows that there isn't a lot of people that know that the building isn't recertified. So you can come in early to recertify the building. And the building typically has that giant sticker shock in that first recertification, then 40, now 30, because they know they haven't had to, repaint their building and seal it. They haven't had to really work and do any exploratory structural or replace any of the illumination standards. And that's really all it is for recertification. It's your balconies, it's your structural, it's your roof, it's your electrical, and your illumination. It's a lot, but it's a new gym. It isn't a new gym. It isn't any amenities. Not your elevators. Like it is based on just the envelope of the building. And once they do that, the next time they come in, and I've now worked with a few that they're expecting the same sticker shock, and the building typically passes with almost nothing being done the next 10 years. And that now you can extend that a little bit because now it's 30 years. So now I'll probably go over for 15 years or 20. You get the bill of health from an engineer. And there's also the assumption of that, once you get the unsafe structure, like we're going to kick everybody out, and that, this causes that. Both the city, the county, and the state, we've implemented solutions to that, and also to ensure that when we do get a recertification, that it is, what we see like bona fide, that it is a true representation, because there was some, lesser, people would just go for a race to the bottom as far as for compliance, and you would not get a true inspection. And now there's some structures on everybody. There's some checks and balances to ensure that. So with that in mind, one of the things that I would like to do, we have meetings now with any of these boards that want us to come in. We'll meet with them, we'll tell them the process, what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done. We can't give a recommendation as to any contractors or architects or engineers, but we at least keep everybody honest. What we're hoping to do now is create a GIS map that we can then show where everybody can see any permit, including recertifications, and if it has lapsed, if it hasn't lapsed, with general information as to what is required, what is happening. Now when you pass by anything, you can kind of see what is a work without permit, what is not a work without permit, because that's typically what has happened in the worst cases, that, to do it quickly, they don't get a permit. They technically passed, but now they've done all this work without an accredited professional, and they have to now do it all over again, because it's required. And so it's early and often. This year, I think we sent out, now the new requirements have up to 2 years. So I think we've sent out over 7,000 notices to properties. And 7,000 notices to properties. So, and that's on the internet. So I think in a few weeks to a month, we'll get a lot of calls and we'll be having a lot of meetings with homeowners, downtown neighborhood association, the Brooklyn Homeowners Association. And really it's just about getting FaceTime with all the residents.
If I can add, I think to that point, the transparency is key, and, you know, we deal in sales and leases in these buildings. And there's two things that somebody said that kind of came to mind. One is, it's impossible to get some of this information, as even a homeowner. Like, are permits done? What's happening? Did we pass a third report? Was one even occurred? Am I allowed to have access to that report? What is allowed and what is, as a homeowner, what can I request? And now, here's the catch, what can I request that now the condo association is gonna charge me for? Oh, you can have a service report at $150 a report, and, you know, and so it's kind of, the transparency would be so great in seeing, all right, if it's a GIS report or something from the counties to show that, so that the homeowner doesn't have to go chase for this information, especially if they are interested in trying to sell or even lease. You now have tenants asking these questions. You're getting tenants who are very savvy asking questions about the building as well, because they're worried if it's deemed unsafe, they have to move out and find a replacement. And then the other thing is, in dealing with those, the condo boards, to your point, is many owners, I mean, you know, Joe's president of an association, but that's not the norm.
Yeah.
I mean, and you're crazy, but the majority of the condos are homeowners who are unaware of half of the bills that are occurring, don't have accurate information, and then do kind of end up hiring out people they know or undo unpermitted work. And I feel many of the times, I mean, I'm like a Pollyanna. I want to believe that they think they're doing right and they just don't know better sometimes. And so it's getting the right counsel, getting the right, is, you know, at the Miami-Dade County, is it easy to find help or people to speak to get consultation on next steps, what is required, so on and so forth. Because to Casey's point, you can't get financing because the management is so poor, you're 6 steps behind all of it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in here and ask you this question. Miami-Dade County passed an ordinance shortly after Champlain Towers. I don't know if you're aware of it, and nobody seems to be aware of it, but that essentially created a registry for all the condominiums in Dade County.
Yeah.
That is supposed to be a
Yes.
registry of all the critical information.
And you're supposed to be able to find it on DBPR or somewhere.
Brilliant idea. I can't believe that wasn't, now, as far as I understand, the enforcement of it and the participation of it by the, you know, now it was mandatory, you know, the ordinance said you shall, but many didn't because they simply don't know about it. It wasn't, I read the ordinance and I thought this is a great idea because it creates a registry where anybody can go, a bank, a potential buyer, an insurance company.
Are supposed to be there.
Condo docs,
Yes.
any status of any 40-year, 30-year,
Yes.
40-year certification, any capital projects going on, any compliances, like all this critical information is supposed to be there. I think it's a brilliant idea. I don't know what's happened to it. I haven't followed it because it seemed that it wasn't. I see a hand up over there and I would love if somebody has some better information on this to tell us about it. I don't know what the appropriate timing.
Right, I
Yes.
real quick,
Please enlighten us, because I'd love to hear more about if this is working or not.
So my name is Ingrid Castillo. I'm the consumer advocate over at the Consumer and Neighborhood Protection Division. We actually oversee the registry, and we personally require these condominium and homeowners associations to register with us. They're supposed to put their capital improvement projects, the name of the board members, so that it's very transparent with them. We've actually had a great success rate, about 2,000 to 3,000 registries so far, and it's online. It's completely public.
great to know, and I guess, and hats off, right? And what can we do? I think I'll put this out rhetorically and like sort of to float and for you all to think about. What can we do to be supporting that and encouraging that? I see you, Jose, also.
I think lenders required that. In other words, you need to have registered and all your information, or we won't give you the loan. That's gonna help, because at the end of the day, if you can't get a loan, or you can't get a loan on a unit or an association loan, that's really bad, and it tends to stop everything. So I think that would be a big help.
And something, just to add to that, there is a registry to actually through, I believe it's through Fannie Mae, where you can see online
Yes,
and
but-
you can see when the last
Yeah.
reports are and.
You can, but
only
only
for-
lenders can see that, and there's no list, and no lender will provide you a list because it feels like it changes every day. So I love this idea, but nobody will provide it to the public because they're too concerned that.
There is a public
There is-
site that I
okay.
was able,
Okay.
yeah, not as me as a banker, when I was actually looking to buy condos,
Okay, so
because
there's
I knew very well that in Brickell in particular, there's not many that would get past the condo questionnaires because they didn't have the reserves and all of that. So was looking, there to see, okay, which ones have been approved in the past, who even looking up, in public records, just all the condo units and who actually has a mortgage filed. And, most of them were private lenders or, offshore companies and not your traditional bank or done it cash sales. But just a side note on that.
No, I appreciate that. And Jose, feel free to, so I'm also hearing like a group of solutions that are around transparency and of information and education. But Jose, I saw your finger on the trigger, and I also want to know about I want you to say your comment, but I also want to paint to you, what are the other creative solutions that can help to reduce the cost, for example, of the repairs? Or any other sort of like, what are the other innovations? I'm sure you're thinking about.
Yeah, and just to finish the earlier one, because I remember all the instances where, we have, and when we would meet with condos, we would let people know, like, hey, this is a public meeting, and then the condo board president would be like, we don't want it to be a public meeting. It's like just so much distrust,
Yeah.
and then we would get an email right after, tell us what really is happening. And in the process of recertification, sometimes you'll have turnover of these condo boards, over and over again. Like, well, we didn't trust the other guy, now we trust this guy. It's deeply frustrating, I think, for everybody involved because of that. And I think what we can do on our end is to have an immense amount of transparency and almost push it where, and I'll dovetail into use an example of the Building Efficiency 305 program that's required in the city. It is that we now have been putting the code enforcement portion of that. And what I think has been said before is that, well, now you're gonna, these are condo owners that are struggling, they're trying to make ends meet, and now you're putting another code enforcement violation on them, you're putting them deeper in the hole. And it's the essence of that is that we haven't really, we started the violations, but the day after the violation hits, we call the person. And we call them again, and we call them, it's like, hey, you have 30 days. It's a very simple, takes you 20 minutes to do this, to go online and put the information. You can have a meeting today, here's a webinar, here's this, there's a lot of condo presidents and condo board owners that are not sophisticated, that are just tenants. And they're just kind of like, hey, what is it that I can do? But, almost to the point that for the first time we have to hold their hand throughout the process and be available as much as possible to ensure that goes through. So the building efficiency program is an example because you have a retuning requirement for these large buildings to where they have to do an energy efficiency improvement. And it's, it's a 5-year period, but you have to save money in 3 years, so it ends up being net positive. But on top of that, any costs that you incur doing that, we then give you as a credit for a permit. So you can come in and say, well, even though recertification is $500, roughly, it's not a lot of money for a permit. But anything else, it's just kind of a constant like carrot. And although we have the threat of the stick, we don't really enforce it in that end of just, setting a person in violation and saying, well, they're on their own, that's on them. They're the ones that you buy the house, you buy the headache, which I think is what has always been the thought from compliance problem.
I'm never gonna use that one, but I appreciate it. To the grant program and special funding, there's two things, and one is Miami, I know there's some Miami-Dade County people in there, so Mayor Levine Cava has been kind of all over this and have been, I know it's something she's been focused on, but there is a loan program for residents earning up to 140% of AMI allowing them to borrow up to $50,000 for structural integrity assessments, and that's repayable over 40 years. So there is that program out there. There's also My Safe Florida Home. Those monies have already been drawn down. That was a program put in place by the CFO, Jimmy Petronis. Sure, it was actually in place probably 10, 15 years ago when they brought it back a couple years ago for single family. And it was a way for people to draw down funds to use towards when saving their house. So they could use like for windows and roofs and things that was gonna make their house more durable. And now they've implemented that program for condos. It was $30 million. It's already all been drawn down. And so the money is there no longer. I think the big point that the legislation wants us to know is there's no bailout coming, I think to Joe's point, but I think the issue has always been, because in my gut experience or experience with legislation, is that the legislators they think this is a Southeast problem. And to Joe's point about the numbers, kind of really is. And so it's gonna be up to our local municipalities and really local areas to kind of help figure out what other grant funding programs there are. I'm a huge proponent, and I've been saying this forever, and see if someone listens at one point, is I'm a huge proponent of Hometown Heroes. I was president of Florida Realtors when we advocated for that program for many reasons, because they were cutting our funding from another area. Anyway, I would envision that the city or our county could create a fund that's like a rotating fund like this. And so could you allow for people at a certain income or median income to draw down funds to help pay for assessments? And then when they sell the unit, they pay it back and goes back into the fund and replaces it for more. That's what that's what Hometown Heroes is. Well, that's what Hometown Heroes is, right? You can pull money down for a first-time home buyer. And when you sell it's a non-interest loan. And when you sell the property, you pay the loan back, or if you refinance it. And so I think there's solutions out there for those who are suffering and seeing the six-figure price tag going, how would I ever pay that? It's just, I think it's truly gonna be up to Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties and our local municipalities to figure that out, because I don't see it occurring at a state level realistically.
Thank you.
Add something on a preventative basis going forward, right? We're talking about structure and the things that are responsibility of the association, but a lot of things that the unit owners do in their own units can affect the broader spectrum, right? Something that we're doing in my building is we have, a couple, plumbers that are coming in and just doing inspections in everybody's unit. Because what impact does that water flow have on the rest of the system throughout the building, right? And how could that potentially, and water, if you know, my building had a lot of leaks recently, and all the unit owners are responsible. It could affect the entire structure and the common elements, right? So just the routine maintenance and maybe having some, approved contractors that are there as resources to the unit owners to do regular checks. And again, that routine maintenance within the responsibility of the unit owner themselves can then have a broader benefit on the association as a whole and impact on the common use areas as well.
To that end, I think one of the requirements that we should explore is to expand upon those requirements that limit it to just the recertification, because those maintenance, that painting, that all these things are what help the property maintain a safe structural envelope that then can be a $5,000 recertification, and that's it. Because if you get in early, you do it consistently, of course that money draws down, but it's a much lower amount of money on the short end when you open it up to all these condos.
I think to that point is human behavior says if there's a deadline, we'll get it done 2 days before. And so I think if you could look at changing some of your statutes and saying, all right, it's every 2 to 3 years you're doing X, Y, Z. Because unfortunately, I believe that unless it's there, we will wait until the 30 years comes, and that's when we will check everything. But to Casey's point, if you are looking at it from that perspective, every 1, 2, 3 years, you're checking something else and doing regular maintenance, just like you would on a car, on a home. It could truly make a difference long-term for those properties. And my fun legislative stat is there's one senator in only one senator of Florida that lives in a condo. And that's Senator Pizzo. So there's a reason why I think there's also another reason why it's not a huge deal to them. So kind of gives you perspective.
You all have been amazing. It's been a fast and furious almost hour. We've got 5 minutes before we take a very quick break. And then we turn it over to all of you. And I really, really, really want each of you to stay, right? You too, if you can, please stay. Because now we're gonna start kind of hashing this out, and you've done a great job of priming, I think, the pump of this room. Final word on the matter. If you haven't said it yet or it hasn't been said at this table, what's something we must do? What's a solution we should explore or pursue that helps both with the short-term issue we're facing and the longer-term issues of affordability, safety, and asset protection? I want to start at that end and come down.
What wasn't mentioned, I think that we need to change statutes. So and not for the doing less. I think one of the alternatives, and it's something that we have in construction now, which is that if you get a pass from and it's required now in the statute, you get a pass from a structural engineer, I think that should then be adopted into for that point of the roofing, right? When you have the time limit and you get a yearly pass or 5 years or whichever is the estimate, that's something that we accept within the permit process. It should be accepted in the private sector as well.
Like insurance, for example?
For insurance, and it should also be passed through and be reflective within the state statute. So that could be with anything. Just to align the Florida Building Code with the other requirements that we have. And it's happened a couple times. It takes a little bit of time. I think we need to get a little bit more creative. You know, I'm going on a stretch here, and I know
Feel free to rotate yourself and others.
Yeah, exactly. For the few people that work for a government that are like.
But that's one of the reasons we brought you, is because we know the state budget.
Yeah.
This is your moment.
Yeah,
Yeah, go.
I can dance through the hoops. I think that we need to start looking at not only alternative solutions, the things that I helped a lot with the solar co-op, where they can create massive amount of buy-in. And it's, as I said, there's 1,500 to 2,500 just in the city of Miami recertifications. So that's 1,500 to 2,500, not it's usually the same engineer, but they got a workload. And even just on the regular, if the property's fine, they're still going out doing the inspections. They're still putting it out there and submitting those reports and going through the permit process. I think we can make it as easy as possible for us. But from permitting to make it as easy as possible, to make it transparent, but we have to get a little bit more creative and go beyond that scope. And Annie, I know that's what you excel at, to look at the creative ways that both, either public-private partnership or to create a fund that then can be used and draw down and draw back. I think these are all things that we need to move forward and really push the needle on, because this is, as I said, people deserve a safe home.
Yeah, I'll be quick with mine. I think we have to come to the realization and be ready for the fact that a certain amount of these condominiums that are old are not going to survive, and they shouldn't, because they're going to be unsafe and it's just going to be an untenable situation. In furtherance of that, I think that the legislature needs to seriously take a look at the termination statute and make it a fair but efficient termination process that allows condos that shouldn't be terminated for not only economic waste, which is already in the statute, but basically for physical and financial waste as well. In other words, if 20% of your 15, 20%, whatever that number should be, can't afford to live there because they can't afford the maintenance, then that project and the situation's not going to get any better. That project shouldn't exist anymore. It shouldn't. It's going to become a problem for government. It's a problem for everybody. So if we face the fact that a certain amount of condos shouldn't exist and should be terminated efficiently, and then we're prepared to deal with the problem, how to deal with the displacement and all so forth. But we have to face that fact because it's coming.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think the transparency piece that we talked about is key for everybody, right? Key for being able to get financing, key for any owners coming in and knowing what they're getting into ahead of time. And again, the preventative, as much as we could do as much preventative maintenance, shifting that mindset. And I like the idea of the legislation, maybe even being shorter term, but less intensive, but shorter term, right? And doing short checkups, same thing on your health, right? If you go for an annual physical, you catch things before it becomes a huge medical issue, right? So maybe creating things that are shorter term, less of projects and more of routine, and then it becomes less of a cash strain on everybody.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think to everyone's point, I think I applaud Miami-Dade County for having some funds available to homeowners and would encourage other municipalities to pick that up and find creative ways to finance as well, especially if they look at what their inventory is of condos and displacement, and perhaps look at it from a displacement perspective too. What will happen to those homeowners when they are displaced? If it is terminated, how quickly do they receive funds from that unit, right? So if my unit is terminated, is it like a sale today? Do I have that cash in my bank account to go find something, or am I, broke until it's actually developed and sold? And so we have to think through some of the creative financing and the creative options for those people who are used to just paying potentially their HOA fees because it's a paid off unit for many of those people in these terminated buildings. And so we will need to think through some creative loan or financing that perhaps once it's sold, the money goes back into a pool. So not, I'm always trying to figure out a way to make it fair for everybody, that it's not free money we're handing out to people, but that it is some sort of a loan process and understanding that we are helping our displaced owners and our own true Miami residents. And then I think more transparency and lunch and learns. I know Miami Realtors used to do a lot of lunch and learns with condo boards about how to get better financing in their building, obviously with the reserve issue being one, but there's other things like tenant and owner proportions. And so more lunch and learns. I think there's an opportunity for the housing advocate department to really shine here, and a lot of our departments to shine, and let Miami-Dade be on the forefront of some of the best results out of this for the state to lead the way. Miami-Dade is the only county in the whole Florida that's doing something for their homeowners right now. And so I would just encourage us to be at the forefront of that continually, and that transparency conversation.
And I'll just add a little piece to that as well, is making sure that if they have to knock down a structure, it's not replacing, this, a low income type housing situation with this luxury, because then where are all those people going to go, right?
We have a tale. We have a tale of two cities in this world. Two cities.
Big can of worms there. Well, guys, can we please give a really hefty round of applause to this exceptional panel? Really. I wish we could keep going, and I know Elle's really tight timeline. Thank you also again to Bilzin. Please stick around. There's coffee, there's food, there's a bathroom around the corner, but come back, because now we need to hear from you, right? And your thoughts on how are we going to address this? There were a ton of gold nuggets out of this. So please, I hope you were taking notes. I hope you were taking mental notes, and we will see you in a few minutes. 5 minutes, everybody. Thank you. Great job, guys. I failed at my job. Everybody, so sorry. Pause 1 second. I didn't quite do it. You're going to go into tables. You're going to pick where you want to go. We're going to put up easels and select tables, but you're going to go into a breakout group discussion. You're going to pick one table to spend the next hour. Here are your 5. I'm going to ask panelists. So sorry to interrupt the conversation, Jose and Joe. Forgive me 1 second. I'm going to ask the panelists, go where you think that you have the greatest expertise, that you can inform the conversation the most. I'll ask you to not pick the same table, and each of you pick where you want to spend the second half of this session. Assessment fees and affordability, accountability and financial transparency, education and support for residents, creative solutions and innovations, and prevention strategies. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I did a fundraiser. Sorry, I was like, I'm so much comedy. Oh, wow, how special. I was like, come on, that's awesome. I mean, I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have any.
Well, that's like.